Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Different Strokes 2022 virtual conference. My name is Austin Willett. I'm CEO of Different Strokes, and it's fantastic to have you all with us this morning. I'd like to start by thanking our sponsor, Bolt, Bird & Kemp. We really appreciate your support for allowing us to run these webinars all week this week. This is the day 5 of our conference. It's the penultimate session today. We've been running sessions throughout the week. And if you were with us for the opening address, which I gave on Monday morning, you may recall that I spoke about our BAS project, BAS standing for Black and Asian Stroke Survivors. We very recently recruited Rahael as our BAS project officer. And I'm absolutely delighted that Rahael's with us this morning. She's only been with us 6 weeks or so it's fantastic that she's available this morning to run this session discussing some issues around the support that's required for Black and Asian stroke survivors. Not only is Rahael available, but she's also helped to recruit 3 Black and Asian stroke survivors, Joy, Priti and Richard, who will also be giving their experiences of this issue. Just to start with a little bit of housekeeping, this call is being recorded, but please rest assured that the only people who will be appearing on my screen are myself and the panel. If you are watching, no details of yourself will be being recorded or captured in any way at all. Those of you who are familiar with Zoom will probably be highly aware of the chat function, so please do use the chat function for any general comments you got. Let us know where you're watching from, etc. There's also a Q&A function. If you have a specific question, please do put that in the Q&A function. I would ask for questions that you use the Q&A and not the chat, because if you use the chat, we're more likely to miss them. But any questions, pop them in the Q&A function, and we'll do our best to answer these. Otherwise, enjoy the session, and I'd like to now hand over to Rahael. Good morning, Rahael. You could just unmute yourself. Thanks, Rahael.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Austin. I'd also like to thank everyone for attending this session on ethnicity and stroke to hear about our new BAS project and our work on raising awareness of younger stroke and providing support to Black and Asian stroke survivors. Last year, Different Strokes established their BAS, Black and Asian Stroke Survivor project, after learning that Black and South Asian people are at greater risk of stroke, Black people are twice as likely to have a stroke than white people, and that Black and South Asian people have a stroke at a younger age. After learning this, we realized that this diversity was not entirely reflected amongst the community of stroke survivors that Different Strokes support. And while around 10% of the UK population is of Black or South Asian descent, in 2021, only around 4% of Different Strokes' beneficiaries were from these communities. With such statistics, we felt that it was no longer enough to simply state that our services were open and available to all, but we had to address this gap and take action to change this. From that, Different Strokes began a national outreach program with 2 aims. The first, to raise awareness of stroke risk amongst Black and Asian communities where stroke is more prevalent at a younger age. And the second was to develop a longer-term plan that aims to break down the barriers preventing Black and Asian stroke survivors from accessing our support services. In 2021, the charity established a volunteer focus group of Black and Asian stroke survivors, and through that, we identified 4 barriers in getting support. We found that there was a lack of awareness of the risk of stroke at all ages, and in particular, Black and Asian people not being aware of the increased risk of stroke they face. We also realized that there was not enough information, for example, leaflets about stroke not containing specific information for people from Black or Asian communities, or not being accessible for people whose first language is not English. We saw that there was a lack of representation and a lack of images of Black and Asian people who did not identify themselves with stroke risk, meaning that when they were looking at NHS stroke campaigns or even our website, they would not have seen themselves in the images and stories shared. And finally, we heard of the cultural and social barriers from the after effects of stroke and the stigma associated with the physical and mental disabilities survivors are diagnosed with. From that, my role was created, and over the past month, we have developed an engagement strategy to tackle these barriers with organizations I plan to approach to help us provide support and raise awareness of stroke amongst Black and Asian communities in the UK. We first plan to start by approaching different religious and community organizations. We've decided to start here as the Black and Asian diaspora in the UK have strong cultural connections with their religion. By sharing this information with religious and community leaders, it'll be taken more seriously coming from a trusted source. Based on the data from this graph, we'll begin by approaching community leaders from gurudwaras, mosques, temples, and Black majority churches. We will then engage with different forms of media, as this is the fastest way to spread information with a wide national outreach and established audiences. These will range from news outlets, especially those which publish content in the native language of these ethnic groups, social media networks, as it has a big reach for the younger demographic we want to engage with, radio, including the BBC Asian Network and Radio 1 Extra, and anti-racism charities such as Black Lives Matter UK. Finally, we will get in contact with NUS, the National Union of Students, an organization that sets up university-wide campaigns across the UK. A gov.uk survey from July 2020 showed that 30% of undergraduate students identified as Black or Asian. And we think that young students from this demographic will spread the word to their family and networks to raise awareness. We hope to launch a campaign with NUS before the new term starts in September next year, so we can set up stalls during Freshers Week and hold talks. Other tactics we also plan to explore are engaging with youth music and religious festivals, including Diwali, Ramadan, Carnival, and even events like Black History Month. Contacting schools and colleges following a similar model as done with universities. And if we have the time and resources, we'll collate the data on the demographics of where most Black and Asian people reside in the UK and contact local governments through the National Association for Local Councils to disseminate this information to these areas. Thank you for listening. And if you have any leads as to who I can get in touch with on this project, please shoot me an email at rahel.kuravilla@differentstrokes.co.uk. We will now move on to our panel. I'm delighted to be joined by Joy, Priti, and Richard, who will introduce themselves and share their thoughts and experiences on this topic. Joy, would you like to begin?
Hi, Priti. Thank you for the introduction. So, my name is Joy, and I'm a 44-year-old stroke survivor. Before the stroke, I was a successful lawyer for over 15 years, and I exercised 4 to 5 times a week. I had several mini strokes between May to September 2020 when I was living in Tanzania, which resulted in an ischemic stroke in September of the same year. The mini strokes were all misdiagnosed by my doctor, and my worries about them were dismissed by my family. I endured many cultural barriers while in Tanzania, which hindered my mental and emotional recovery. As a Muslim and African, traditional and cultural norms disallowed the use of one's left hand, which was a problem for me as my entire right side was affected by the stroke. This left me having to rely heavily on others, which is something that didn't come naturally to me. Being strong-willed and stubborn, I was lucky I dared to go against the rules and became more independent when I started using my left hand more. There was no understanding, awareness, or emotional support from my family, friends, and community, which left me feeling very hurt, isolated, and vulnerable. People I'd hoped would be there for me in my time of need vanished as soon as they heard about my condition. Even fellow survivors were reluctant to talk to me or support me. I guess some of them were either embarrassed to discuss their condition or would rather forget about the experience. See, in Tanzania, people don't like to talk about any medical condition, which is still taboo, such as HIV/AIDS, cancer, COVID, and strokes. My family was ashamed of my disability and tried to keep me hidden from people until I had fully recovered and appeared to be normal on the outside. I had to learn to get over the shame and accept my body. And I started going out in public with my partner, who is Scottish. When I tried to explain my situation to some of my friends, my family's friends, they were sympathetic, but did not want to intervene for fear of losing favor or financial support from my family. I suffered from many hidden disabilities as a result of the stroke, which included a decline in my cognitive skills, fatigue, emotionalism, and depression. And yet, the doctors never warned me about them. When my partner suggested that I should get some counseling, one of the doctors back home replied that it wasn't the African way. I should just talk to my friends and everything would be fine. Fortunately, my partner did not listen to the doctor, especially when I struggled to sleep and had flashbacks of my stroke. He eventually got hold of a psychiatrist who confirmed that I had anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. There was an expectation that I should remain strong when I felt broken, and any feelings that I had were either ignored or not validated by my family. The cultural barriers unfortunately did not deter my physical recovery, which I've worked on very hard over the years. Before the stroke, I used to kickbox for 16 years. It was one of my goals to resume this and be active again. I also decided 3 weeks after my stroke to start writing a journal about my experience. It was initially supposed to be a form of therapy, but the journal ended up becoming a published book and a guide for survivors, their carers, and their families. I hope that by speaking up and being honest about some of the cultural barriers that I've encountered, the Black community will realize how toxic these barriers can be. The community needs to change its behavior towards those who are vulnerable and is a bit disabled. We need to be loved, supported, seen, not judged or made to feel ashamed.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Joy. Priti, would you like to go next? You're muted, Priti. Sorry. Can you unmute yourself? I think you're off.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Priti. I'm Asian, as you can tell. I've been brought up in a multicultural society. The stigma of the stroke has always been attached to an elderly person and not a young person. Through my journey, I've learned it's not my ethnicity that's kept me bedded. It's my own knowledge about stroke survivors, young stroke survivors, because the expectation is that it always happens to an elder, but you never expect it to happen to you. It's 2021. I suffered a blood clot. I trained as a vaccinator, came out the other side, ended up having a clot, and I then had a journey of my own to learn about strokes, because I was never given the information about fatigue happening, what happens after a stroke, what happens when you're released from hospital. I suffered hallucinations, depression. I lost sight in my left eye. So it's been a learning curve for myself, and for learning for myself, being a young stroke survivor, it's also allowed me then to spread that amongst the community that I live in. So I don't think ethnicity has hindered me, but it's my own knowledge being a young stroke survivor. And I think through my journey, I'm able to then impart this onto the community, whether it be Asian, Black, wherever you may come from. I think it starts with you. You have to have your own drive and passion to come out the other side, because there is another side. It's finding that little spark within you that says, I'm going to make it through. And it's seeing things in a different way that, yes, it may not work this way, but there are other ways to do things, and that's totally acceptable.
Thanks so much, Priti. Richard, would you like to conclude?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Richard. Yes, my journey began in May 2008. I was 36 at the time. I was the first one in my family to ever had a stroke. And stroke was fairly new to me. If it was not for my dad, he was by my side when it happened, then so he was able to explain to the paramedics. I would not have, they would not have known how to do with it. So yeah, so I was quickly sent to a local hospital, but in the local hospital, for some reason, they did not have the equipment, or they know how to deal with it. So I was sent to bigger hospital, King's College Hospital, which is in Suffolk, in London. So I was in hospital there for 3 weeks. I then was moved into a rehab center, which is opposite King's College. Yeah, and that rehab center was, well, it was for mainly people under the age of 45. And being in Suffolk, which is part in London, it was heavily populated by many Blacks and Asians and very few whites. This was my first real taste, or to see that stroke affected a lot of young people. And so, and also a lot of Blacks. I had heard of many older people, as Priti said, that suffered, but not many younger. I think in the rehab center, there was a boy at the age 11 that I knew. Yes, so the stroke affected my right side, so I was paralyzed for at least a month, but I lost my speech totally. So I in the end I spent 3 months at the rehab center, and my therapy was purely on speech therapy. There was a bit of physio, but it was not much. Now, in Suffolk, and at the King's College, which is about at least 20 miles from where we live. We live in the borough of Bromley. Now in Suffolk, that area is where a lot of Blacks and Asians. So I was able to get a lot of the services that was offered to us. It is only when I moved back to my home after the 3 months that I really realized that there was nothing really for young or even Black or Asian stroke survivors. The services that they offered was I was having 1 hour a week on speech therapy, whereas before it was continuous in the rehab center. And the classes or the activities that I went to while at home, it was attended by many older and white stroke survivors, which is fine because of the area that it was in, but it left me feeling quite depressed, being a younger and Black guy with these other survivors. So that left me feeling quite depressed, going to those meetings, seeing that it was people not really looking like me. So I've been campaigning with the local authority to be able to share my experiences, and in that they do, so that they can help to at least cater for all people. So that is a brief summary of my story, and I hope that it helps someone. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you to all of our panelists for sharing their stories, and also to Rahael for providing more information on this project. We've had lots of fantastic comments in, particularly for yourself, Joy, just to go through some of the comments that you said. Thank you for sharing your personal experiences, Joy. Your determination and courage are inspiring. I find it interesting listening to the cultural views from your family that you had to deal with. Wow, Joy, thank you for sharing. I'm staggered at how your community made you feel. I've learned so much from sharing your story. So thank you so much for that, Joy. It's been very eye-opening for a lot of people. We've had a few questions come in. The first one with you, Joy. What advice would you give to someone who is experiencing the same lack of understanding within their community?
Well, I think what I did is I basically, that was one of the things that I was told by my physiotherapist, that I should try and communicate with other survivors. So unfortunately, I found one who lived in what do you call it, in Netherlands. And so by talking to her, I was able to learn more about what was going on. But unfortunately, it can be quite hard to find somebody to connect with. So I'm hoping that somehow, somewhere, there'll be a lot of survivors out there who are willing to impart the information to make others feel that they're not alone. Because it's very hard to find somebody when you're in that situation. And especially when people just don't understand. And when you can't express yourself, they think that you can't understand, but you can't understand. You just don't know how to express yourself. That's what I found very difficult.
Thank you. And there's also a question about your book. Someone asking what's your book called and where can we find it?
It's called The Metamorphosis of a Butterfly, and it's
Oh,
available on Amazon.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll look that up quickly now, and then I'll pop a link for that in the chat in case anyone would like to look at that. A question for Priti. You mentioned that survivors should find the inside spark within themselves. What encouraged you to find your spark?
oh. Me-
Apologies, Priti, for you seem to be on mute for some reason.
Sorry, that my daughter was my drive. If I had given up on life and not come out of the hole that I dug for myself, it wouldn't be fair on her. And I wanted her to know that life shouldn't be given up on. Each day is precious. And I wanted her to see that if mummy can get through things, then anything's possible for her to get through.
Thank you. Please do continue to send questions through if you'd like to ask anything to Rahael or our panel. Just a couple of general questions here that we've had. I wonder what the awareness amongst professionals is for people of the BAS group to be at higher risk. Are they a particular type of stroke that's more importantly, is there a particular type of stroke that's more importantly the cause of disability than in white people? You know, are there more bleeds or ischemic stroke, for example? The short answer to that is I don't know. I'm not a medical professional, but what I will say is, you know, one of the things that obviously we want to do with the work that Rahael will be doing and the BAS work is to engage with the medical community, with healthcare professionals to ensure that they are aware of this issue. And so we'll certainly be looking to have conversations with them going forward. A question for Richard. Richard, what advice would you give to others in your place?
The advice I would give is try and find as many networks of groups, similar groups that can help you and support you. I initially heard about different strokes through a friend in hospital, but even though I applied for the information, I delayed in contacting them. So it was only at least a year after when I made the contact. Another group which has now been disbanded was a group called Connect, and they were based in London Bridge, and they were a peer-to-peer group where you go in on weekdays and do have coffee, have a sit down with people, do some photography, do some painting, and just really be with other stroke survivors and hearing their experiences. I also got involved with them in they were visiting hospitals to help other stroke survivors. So I kept myself busy. I find that when you are not involved in stuff, or when you are not meeting other people, you have gone through this, you tend to look inside you, and that is when the person comes in. but when you see our other people, and you see the struggles and what they are going through, you then begin to appreciate what that you are the position that you are in. So that is how I was able to help myself and others.
Thank you, Richard. Just continuing to look through the chat, some great comments coming in. I used to befriend on the stroke wards at Gloucester for many years. In that time, I saw few Black and Asian people. I used to wonder why. I often used to wonder if their own communities were dealing with their stroke in a different way. Hearing all of these experiences is enlightening, bringing awareness of additional challenges that may be faced or imposed by the community around you. Thank you for being so open, everyone. Joy, your story is incredible. Unfortunately, I don't think your experience is that uncommon. Education is something that's really needed within these communities. That brings us on to our next question for yourself, Rahael. I think education in these communities is key. Would you agree? What can we, as part of a different strokes community, do to help educate people in such communities?
I think it comes down to just peer support, which is, I think, Different Strokes' main service. So as long as we can provide as many peer support groups as we can to, you know, provide that shared sort of the shared experiences we face and to talk about it, I think that's, and within these people, I guess, like Priti and Richard and Joy have said, it's just about spreading this information on, to say I had a stroke and it was at a younger age.
Joy, if I can come to you to add.
So one thing I wanted to say is that obviously this talk happened in Tanzania, and I came to England in April last year, and I joined another stroke community, and I found when we had the peer group, I found that they just didn't understand where I was coming from, so they were not able to really help me. But luckily, when I found Different Strokes on Instagram, I just liked the way they explained things, and they were just there was a way that they explained it that made it just feel more in touch with me. And especially when I found out that all of them were stroke survivors, that really made me feel like I was home. Because in the other groups, in the other society, in the other organizations, they were all people who were volunteers or who worked there, but didn't have the same experience. So that was very good for me, and that's why I decided to really do more and to help others too.
Thank you. And this point of peer support is so fundamental to what we do at Different Strokes, and we're proud of the fact that half of our trustees are stroke survivors, more than half of our staff are stroke survivors, because, you know, we will always put the stroke survivor and their voice at the heart of everything that we do. Rahael, a question about how people can get involved supporting this project.
We've actually just begun. So I think, as someone mentioned in the Q&A, we will definitely be sharing more statistics and sort of updates about how this project is continuing. And I think it's all about spreading the word and sharing this information. And maybe once we do have this more information live up and running on our website, we can share about the progress made and how we can sort of spread this information on to bigger organizations like the NHS. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Well, once again, thank you to everyone for their questions this morning, and thank you for all your comments in the chat. Oh, I think we've just had one more question come through. Could you work with other groups on health awareness in relevant communities, e.g. blood donation, much needed from the Black community for those with sickle cell disease? The short answer is that is yes, we can, obviously, as much as our resources allow, because we are a small team, and as you would would imagine, you know, our priorities are very much focused on stroke survivors. What I would say though is we are linked in with various networks. Particularly, we're a member of the Neurological Alliance that supports 70 to 80 organisations who support people with neuro conditions. And it obviously makes sense when there are other organisations in the Neuro Alliance who are looking into this area for us to collaborate with them. So I would expect that we will be having conversations with other such groups going forward. Thank you, Rahael. Thank you, Joy, Priti, and Richard. It's been absolutely fantastic to hear from you this morning, and it's clear from all the comments that this session has been a real eye-opener. So really appreciate you sharing your stories. That's been absolutely fantastic. We are at a relatively early stage with this work. Rahael's only joined us 6 weeks ago, but it'll be a major priority for us going forward because we know that this is a really important issue. So we just got one more session left in our virtual conference this year. This will be our Ask the Expert session this afternoon, featuring Dr. Giles Yates, Claire Everett, and Melanie Derbyshire, who are all experts in various areas, chaired by our Chair of Trustees, Ranj Palmer. So do join us for that session at 2 o'clock this afternoon. But once again, thank you to all our panel. Thank you to all of you for viewing today, and we'll see you soon.